Silence is not weakness. It is restraint, and restraint terrifies manipulators. Most people talk themselves into traps. They explain, justify, react, defend. They believe words give them control. The Stoics understood the opposite. The more you speak, the more power you leak. Manipulation feeds on reaction. Anger gives manipulators direction. Defensiveness gives them leverage. Explanation gives them entry points. Silence gives them nothing. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. Your nervous system wants resolution. Your ego wants to be understood. Your instincts want to fight back. But Stoic discipline demands something harder. Non-participation. The Stoics didn't see silence as passive. They saw it as selective engagement. You don't respond to everything because not everything deserves access to your mind, your energy, or your intentions. Manipulators rely on predictability. They provoke to study your reactions. They push to locate your emotional limits. Every word you offer helps them map you. Silence scrambles that map. When you don't react, they escalate. When you don't explain, they grow anxious. When you don't engage, they reveal themselves. Silence forces projection, and projection exposes motive. This video is not about being quiet all the time. It's about knowing when silence becomes a weapon. We're going to break down 9 dark Stoic strategies that use silence not as avoidance, but as dominance methods that dismantle manipulation without confrontation. Because the most powerful response is often no response at all. And once you understand how silence shifts control, you will realize something unsettling. Most people lose battles they never needed to fight simply because they spoke, when silence would have ended the game. Let's begin. Dark Stoic Trick 1. Refuse to react immediately. Manipulation thrives on speed. The manipulator provokes, then waits for the reflex. Anger, defense, explanation, anything because reaction is confirmation. It tells them where you're sensitive and how fast they can move you. The Stoics trained themselves to insert a pause, not to suppress emotion but to deny it control. When you don't respond immediately, you break the rhythm. The manipulator expects momentum. When it doesn't arrive, uncertainty replaces confidence, and uncertainty is Here's what happens in that pause. They replay what they said. They question if it landed. They begin filling the silence, and in filling it, they exposed intent. Most people rush to respond because silence feels like loss. The Stoic understands silence as positioning. You're not retreating, you're letting the other person overextend. This doesn't mean staring theatrically or acting cold. It means stay neutral, calm/unhurried. You acknowledge nothing until you've decided whether engagement is even necessary. Machiavelli advised delay to confuse opponents. The Stoics refined it further. Delay to protect the mind. By refusing to react immediately, you communicate something powerful without saying a word. You do not control my state. And once a manipulator realizes they can't move you on demand, they lose their primary weapon. Next, we'll talk about how silence turns questions into trapsand. Why answering less often gives you more control. Dark Stoic Trick 2. Answer questions with less than expected manipulators. Love questions not because they want answers, but because questions force participation. Every answer reveals something: your priorities, your emotions, your limits. The Stoics understood that not every question deserves a full response. Most people overanswer out of anxiety. They explain, clarify, justify. They treat questions as obligations. A Stoic treats them as invitations. Invitations can be declined. When you respond with less than expected, control shifts instantly. A short answer creates imbalance. A neutral answer creates uncertainty. A delayed answer creates pressure. And pressure makes manipulators sloppy. Consider how often questions are framed to corner you. Why did you do that? What do you really mean? Don't you think that was wrong? These aren't questions. They're traps disguised as curiosity. The Stoic response is not confrontation, it's minimalism. Yes, no, I'll think about it. That's your interpretation. No elaboration, no defense. This forces the manipulator to do the work. They must reveal their agenda if they want more, and in doing so, they expose themselves. Silence after a short answer is especially powerful. It creates a vacuum. The other person feels compelled to fill. They talk, they justify, they escalate, and every word gives you information. The Stoics believed clarity comes from restraint. You don't win by saying more, you win by saying only what's necessary. Next, we'll explore how silence becomes a mirand. Why letting others hear themselves talk is one of the fastest ways to dismantle manipulation. Dark Stoic Trick 3. Let silence become a mirror. Silence doesn't just block manipulation, it reflects it. When you stop filling space, people fill it for you. And in that space, their true intentions surface. The Stoics understood that most people reveal themselves when they are not being interrupted. Manipulators rely on dialogue, on back and forth, on emotional exchange. Silence removes their feedback loop. They no longer know if they're winning, losing, or being ignored, and that uncertainty forces exposure. Watch what happens when you stay silent after provocation. They repeat themselves, they escalate their tone. They over-explain. They contradict earlier statements. You learn everything without offering anything. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to insecure people. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, and many people cannot tolerate that. They rush to regain control by talking, justifying, or attacking more openly. The Stoic doesn't interrupt this process. You maintain eye contact. You remain neutral. You do nothing. And the other person begins revealing patterns. Manipulation, insecurity, entitlement, aggression, all of it surfaces naturally. This is not passive behavior. It's observational dominance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you don't need to respond to every impression. Most impressions dissolve on their own if left untouched. Silence allows truth to emerge without confrontation. The moment you interrupt, defend, or argue, you reset the game. You give them something to work with. Silence keeps the pressure on them. Next, we'll look at how silence protects your intentions and why revealing less about your plans makes manipulation impossible to sustain. Stoic trick 5. Starve manipulators of emotional reward. Manipulation only works when it produces emotion, anger, guilt, defensiveness, anxiety, validation. Any reaction feeds the loop. The Stoics understood that emotion is currency, and manipulators are always trying to extract it. Silence cuts off the supply. When you don't react emotionally, the manipulator gains nothing. No confirmation, no escalation, no satisfaction. And without reward, the behavior collapses. This is why boredom is devastating to manipulators. They provoke you, remain neutral. They accuse you, remain quiet. They dramatize you, remain unmoved. Soon, they feel foolish, performing for an audience that doesn't exist. The Stoics didn't suppress emotion to be cold. They regulated it to remain sovereign. You feel internally, but you do not donate that feeling to someone trying to control you. This frustrates manipulators deeply. They may escalate tactics, switch tone, or attempt sympathy. But each attempt reveals desperation, and desperation exposes weakness. Silence here is not avoidance. It is emotional non-cooperation. You're not punishing them. You're refusing to participate. Eventually, manipulators look elsewhere. They seek more reactive targets, more generous emotional donors, and you are left undisturbed not because you fought, but because you are no longer profitable. Next, we'll look at how silence creates psychological distance and why distance, once established, makes manipulation structurally impossible. Dark Stoic trick 6. Use silence to create psychological distance. Manipulation requires proximity, not physical proximity, but emotional and psychological access. The Stoics understood that the moment you create distance in the mind, control collapses. Silence is the fastest way to build that distance without confrontation. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop inviting people into your inner world. When you stop reacting, you stop sharing emotional space. When you stop engaging, you stop being reachable. This distance is devastating to manipulators because they rely on familiarity. They need to feel close enough to influence you. Silence pushes them out quietly, cleanly, permanently. Here's what psychological distance looks like in practice. You respond less often. You respond more briefly. You stop volunteering personal details, not out of hostility, but out of discipline. The Stoics believed that peace comes from controlling what enters the mind. Silence is a filter. It prevents other people's chaos, urgency, and manipulation from crossing into your mental space. As this distance grows, something important happens. You become harder to read. Manipulators thrive on predictability. They study your reactions, your habits, your emotional tells. Silence erases that data. Without information, they can't adjust strategy. They can't escalate effectively. They can't maintain control. Eventually, they disengage not because you fought them, but because you are no longer accessible. The Stoics called this withdrawal of assent. You are no longer consenting to the interaction. And without consent, manipulation has no foundation. Next, we'll cover the final and most powerful use of silence, how knowing when to stay silent permanently ends manipulation without creating enemies. Dark Stoic trick 7. Knowing silence must become permanent. There is a moment when silence stops being a tactic and becomes a boundary. The Stoics understood that not all manipulation deserves ongoing management. Some patterns are not meant to be corrected. They are meant to be silence, when sustained, becomes separation. And separation ends manipulation completely. Temporary silence tests behavior. Permanent silence ends it. This is where most people hesitate. They worry about appearing cold, rude, unfair. But the Stoics weren't concerned with appearances. They were concerned with freedom of the mind. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, drains you, or attempts to control you, continued engagement, Ivan. Silent engagement keeps the door open. Achi, that points silence must harden into distance. No explanations. No closure speeches. No emotional accounting. Just absence. Permanent silence communicates a final truth. You no longer have access. That message doesn't need words. In fact, words would weaken it. Manipulators hate this most of all because it denies them resolution. They cannot argue with absence. They cannot provoke someone who is no longer present. They are forced to sit with the loss of influence, and that loss is irreversible. The Stoics believed that peace is not achieved by fixing everyone. It's achieved by choosing who you allow into your inner circle. Silence is how that circle is protected. Once you understand this, you stop fearing silence. You stop filling gaps. You stop rescuing conversations that don't deserve continuation. You reserve your voice for those who meet you with respect. And when silence becomes permanent, manipulation dies not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Next, we'll tie all 9 principles together and show how silence becomes not just a defense, but a form of quiet dominance.